This week, the House of Representatives Intelligence Committee said in a report that two Chinese telecommunications giants, Huawei Technologies and ZTE, are a threat to U.S. national security. According to the report, this concern stems from the company's alleged coziness with the Chinese government and alleged involvement in cyber attacks on U.S.-based networks. It urged the U.S. government and private sector to refrain from doing business with Huawei and ZTE and recommended that the Federal Committee on Foreign Investments in the United States block any acquisition, takeover, or merger involving the two companies. Welcome to Across America Talk. As usual, I'm joined by China Daily columnist Chen Weihua and veteran journalist Zhou Boris. Welcome both. Let's start by talking about these two Chinese companies. Huawei has had a U.S. presence for 11 years, employing 1,500 employees here in 12 offices. It's the world's second biggest provider of telecommunications equipment, and the ZTE has a presence of 15 years. It's now the world's number 5 telecom gear maker. So why have these two Chinese companies all of a sudden been put into such a difficult spot, Weihua?
Well, I wouldn't think it's all of a sudden. Actually, it has been going on for a while. If you recall, in 2008, Huawei was forced to give up its bid for 3Com, under sort of the national security concern. And in 2010, it was also forced, to be a supply for the Spring Nextel. Last year was its acquisition of 3F was also suggested, recommended by CFIUS, Committee of Foreign Investment in the United States, to divest in other areas. So this has been going on at least for the last few years. I think it's sad because the accusation is always Huawei's founder, Ren Zhengfei, used to be an army officer. Huawei may have connection with the Chinese military or the Chinese government. I think this is a Cold War mentality, because if you think, other company, telecom system supplied Huawei here is safe or not, you should also be concerned about, say, Ericsson of Sweden, Alcatel, Lucent from France, whether their equipment are being safe or not, pose a security concern or not. Why only, Chinese companies are being singled out? If you think the founder's background, the ones being army officers are concerned, I can name many, U.S. business executives who have been in the U.S. Army or maybe even the CIA. I think Huawei, unfortunately, has fallen into a victim of this strong lobbyist. In Washington, Huawei has a lot of competitors. I can just name a few. Cisco, those companies. Huawei is just incompetent in the sense that it's not doing as good a job in lobbying Washington as American companies. So this fear-mongering about Chinese companies just being so effective in this country, that's unfortunate. That said, I think Huawei, ZTE, as the Chinese investors coming to the U.S. should actually learn how to play the games here, how to actually use the Washington lobbyists, and actually know the procedures of the U.S. better. I wouldn't say they never made a mistake, filing maybe information to CFIUS earlier in time. So that's things Chinese investors should pay attention to.
Let me ask you, Zhou, do you think there might be a possibility of retaliation from Beijing?
Right now, this report from the House Intelligence Committee, although sharply critical of Huawei's and ZTE's practices, is only a recommendation. So there is no case yet. It remains to be seen whether the administration will take this up, or a new administration, should Mitt Romney be elected in November. Right now, though, what the panel is saying is that U.S. government agencies and companies should consider not doing business with either of these two Chinese companies, and that any mergers or takeovers or acquisitions in which either of them might be involved should be blocked. So let's take a deep breath and remember where we are with this. I don't think we can just write off such concerns, though, as some kind of Cold War hysteria. There are legitimate concerns probably to be raised here. I think we should let the process unfold. And Perhaps in terms of retaliation, and the long way around your question, so far Beijing has been non-committal on the idea. Some critics say that when the Chinese government does decide to take retaliatory action in trade, it often does not announce these measures, and sometimes it happens much later than anyone is expecting. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. We're led to believe that there are, trade rules in force now, and maybe we'll see something like this come up at the WTO. I know there's a large carve out for things like national security, but maybe the process. I'd like to see some serious people in the U.S. Congress and maybe the administration at least pursue the offer that it appears Huawei, at least, I don't know about ZTE, has made for a third-party inspection regime.
Very interestingly, when this Congressman Rick Larson talked about China sort of bashing, he said actually in the divided Congress, you actually find a consensus in China bashing. So I don't think it's surprising that when there is a bipartisan support for such. Even Zhou said this is only a recommendation. I would say the damage is done. Even because this is from the message from very high level lawmakers. You already spread the message. I mean, if it's not true, what are you going to do the damage control? I don't think the Chinese government, and I hope the Chinese government would not retaliate, and I hope the Chinese government would not do sort of the same fear-mongering about American companies in China, because actually I think it's a great thing the Chinese seems to abandon this sort of a Cold War mentality. We could actually do the same fear-mongering about U.S. companies, say, could there be a national security concern for Cisco's equipment in China's telecom system? Should we worry about Boeing, GE, Caterpillar, all of which actually had a strong business ties with U.S. military, the Defense Department? Should we worry about the Visa, MasterCard, Bank of America, PayPal, Western Union, which severed their business ties to WikiLeaks after the U.S. government put pressure on them in 2010. They could do this to China in the future. So should we put some restriction on them? No, I think the Chinese seems to have a much healthier mindset at this moment. I think actually that's sad to see what's happening in Washington to me. There is a lot of talk about the Chinese outward investment is going to reach like $1 trillion by 2020. I mean, a lot of countries would welcome Chinese investment. I mean, actually, you go to the cities, the state, the governor, the city mayors in the U.S., they all welcome. Only Washington it becomes politics. So I think this helps U.S. economy, help employment here. So I think it's a win-win game for China and the U.S. I think the message on Huawei is just wrong. It's not going to help the U.S. attract more Chinese investment. I mean, that said, a lot of Chinese investment are being made in the U.S. Most Chinese investment projects have been approved, no problem.
All right, thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks for watching and being with us. For more information, please go to ChinaDailyUSA.com.
China, actually, the divided Congress.